Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly. And voila, you get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I am your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we have our friend and colleague, Dwight Brown, as co-host. Hey, Dwight, how are you?
David, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Just got back from SHRM, and boy, my arms are tired. And with us today, we have Carlee Wolfe, who is the Director of Organizational Effectiveness with the Hyatt Hotels Corporation. Hey, Carlee, how are you?
I'm good. How are both of you?
We're good. We're coming down from that dad joke.
Yeah.
So, Carlee, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Because you've got a really cool background for the audience.
Yeah, thanks. So I've spent my career in talent and organizational development. Been privileged to play in that space since I left school, and I started my career, was super lucky, started working at USA Volleyball doing training and supporting coaches, which was a ton of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, super unique experience, I should say. And from there, I was able to move to the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, doing leadership development. So still in sport, having a good time, but from a different angle in the talent and OD space. And then got to spend some time in for-profit education doing more organizational development type work. So culture, change management, talent management, and employee engagement. And ton of fun, was there during a major industry shift. So I got to be a part of a lot of HR changes, from inside out. From there, I got to cut my teeth on consulting. So wanted to take that dip into the external facing world just to learn like what different brands and companies were doing when it comes to people and culture, and missed the internal aspect. I always like talk to people about you're in your own home and there's like being a visitor in a home. And so I missed being in my own home, and so moved back into industry, taking a role at Under Armour, leading a change management function there, also during major industry transformation. And from there, which is where I'm at right now, Hyatt Hotels, leading our organizational effectiveness team. So that's change management, it's employee engagement and experience, as well as some leadership development work and culture. And so I always like to tell people this, I moved from one COVID industry to the other, like retail to hospitality. Sure. But I have found it's been like an interesting time to be in both of those industries, because you're at huge brands who are also building back or reimagining. Not that I think all companies have been reimagining in this space. Yeah. I think when you're cut down to your core, though, and re-examining, how do you get back to your purpose and really deliver on those promises, it's something special. So yeah, that's where I'm at. That's a little bit about my career. I've moved around a bit to follow those opportunities, which I also appreciate. So I've been in and around the United States, East Coast, almost all the way to the West Coast, in Arizona. Wow. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's cool. Well, we were geeking out as you were going through your background. You kept mentioning different things and different roles, and we were like, wow, that's so cool. So
that's cool.
We're going to live vicariously through you, certainly during the podcast, but probably afterwards as well.
Yeah, I think when I left, college, like a good college student, when people are like, what do you want to do? I think my answer was something like, I want to do something cool. Whatever that something was. I didn't know what something was. I happened to land in the space I'm in today, but at least starting with a cool brand like USA Volleyball or opportunity. So, I have all kinds of cool stories.
You definitely hopped also to really very public brands, which I think is very laudable as well.
Yeah, that's not always an easy step to make.
No. So one fun thing that you may not know about Carlee is Carlee spells her name very interesting, and she's going to tell us why.
So this is a good question. And by the way, a true question of like, tell me something you don't know or that you'd want to know. Yeah. I think like maybe my close friends know the answer to this, which is, so Carlee, Carlee, correct spelling of my name, is actually kind of a family name. So on my mom's side, her mom's name was Carol, and her dad's name was Leland. Both people that I didn't get an opportunity to know because they passed away. One, Leland before I was born, and Carol just after I was born. but it's like a nice, fun family carry-on that's a little bit different, right? It's not first name, middle name, just kind of this nice blend of people that have mattered in my family's life. So
that's really cool.
That's why Carlee, Carlee, has come to be. And also, I think gives good opportunities for nicknames too. You can split Car, you can split Lee, which have all been nicknames throughout my life. But that's how it came to be.
Very cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So our topic for today is one that really cuts to a lot of the heart of the matter of the HR Data Labs podcast, which is change management, measuring starting simply. Really excited to talk about this. So Carlee, our first question is around change management. It's often viewed as really difficult to manage. Why is it important, and how do you measure, and why wouldn't you?
Welcome to The Human Role, your go-to podcast where HR and payroll collide with innovation. I'm your host, Tiana Neal, and every month I'm diving deep with industry experts and change makers, bringing you real talk insights, practical tips, and fresh takes you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a leader, practitioner, or just curious about the latest HR and payroll trends, I've got you covered. Ready to roll with the best? Tune in for fresh perspectives, actionable tips, and the knowledge you need to roll forward with confidence. Subscribe now and let's transform the way you work.
Yeah. Okay, so I am very passionate about this topic because I've been in the change space for a while. And I think every organization that ever invests in change management is always looking for the silver bullet on, number one, what do we do? And number two, how do we know that it's successful? And I have found that change, because it always has to do with people, right? Like humans and behaviors and our belief systems, right? Like that's hard to measure. And by the way, it's also hard to, in quote, manage. We're not like managing people. Like how do we inspire and create meaning from change is kind of the way that I like to look at it. And so when you talk about measuring that, it's always a tough question. So why is it important? Well, like anything, you're making an investment. A company is saying, hey, I want to dedicate resources, or I want to dedicate mind share capacity to facilitate successful change, right? We've made an investment in a technology, in a process, a way of working, a way of being that we want to realize. And in order to do that, we have to inspire people to come along on the journey. So why is it important to measure is you want to be able to say, like, did we actually achieve that business outcome or that objective that we were after? And the reason why I think sometimes simple is better is back to the human dynamics component, is that it can be very complex and it can also feel very soft, right? When you're meeting with an executive and you're saying, people feel good about this change. Right. Like, oh, okay, like how does that hit the bottom line? So simplicity, I think that matters, and if you can make it, by the way, simple doesn't always mean, I think when you're constructing what simple looks like, you still have to peel back the onion, right? What are we trying to achieve? And how do we get to that measure of success? And so by simplicity, I mean, what is it that we're trying to do, right? What's the change? And what are the indicators that we're looking for that drive that success? And how can we create a measure in which to report on that? And so I've seen something as simple as, in a project we've talked about, how do we have a bunch of leaders in front of us who are leading a very difficult change. They're probably a little scared about that, whether they want to admit it or not. There's probably sort of that gut intuition of like, I've never done this before, or I have a lot of people staring at me asking questions that I don't know, and that feels uncomfortable, right? So there's this sort of worry that comes with leaders and leading large transformation. And so when I talk about simplicity, I've seen it where we even just ask leaders, like, how confident or comfortable are you in communicating this change, right? And then insert change management intervention. Could be here's your communication toolkit, here's a training that we've done. And then re-asking that question, like, what's your confidence now? And just seeing, like, did we move the needle in a before and an after sentiment before we, send leaders off to drive the change? So that's why I talk about simple. I don't think it has to be, this big dashboard. I don't think we have to look at crazy metrics. I think it could just be down to the bare bones of, like, what are we asking people to do?
I think one of the keys, though, is to be able to outline what the goal was from the beginning. Because having a very clear goal as to what the change is for, and then being able to measure that should be simple, that you have a really measurable, achievable, smart, if you want to use that term, goal that you're trying to achieve. I think we kind of lose that sometimes, especially in HR transformations, is what was the original goal? And when we set out to do this, did we do the right thing with measurement? Did we do the right thing with investment? Did we do the right thing with providing the right tools? And then test them along the way to make sure that either we did use the right things and we're still on target from the original ask, or do we need to take a different direction because we've been pushed in that different direction because markets change, the economic conditions change, the pandemic has changed a lot of things, right?
Yeah, and I think you're touching on something too when we talk about simple. It's also, what did we influence or do that we want to measure as well, right? And I think that's where it can become complicated. So for example, if to help people along, we want to do a training, right? Like, how are you leaning in to just measure some of the like skill aspect that's going to be important for the change? I always love the analogy of fitness. I don't know if it's because I like grew up in the sports industry where I just love sports and fitness in general, but it's like, if you want to lose weight, sure, you could just look at the scale every time and that's simple enough. But what changes are you making to get to that outcome, right? And so maybe 1 week you're looking at, not even a week, like month or two, you're looking at maybe your food intake, and that is a measure in and of itself. Or you're looking at your workout routine, and that could be a measure in and of itself. And so I think of the same thing with change. Like, how do you just break it down to your point, like, what are we trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. And then with the strategies that we're employing, like, how do we measure that and be specific and know that that strategy is actually having an impact on the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, that is so key because simplicity is very difficult for us, especially when we're going through changes and doing projects that require big change. And, being able to get people to filter it down to what are the vital few. And that's always a difficult conversation or difficult set of conversations. Everybody's got their own view, but spending that time up front and getting to that simplicity that you talk about is key in so many arenas.
Definitely. And I think one way you can help break that down too is like continually asking like the why and the how. Well, why would how would we measure that? And I think that's where you start to get down into that like simple yet valuable nugget. And then the other thing I was thinking about when you're talking is one of the questions is like, well, why not? Why not measure? And I think sometimes people get hung up on those complications or trying to take in every stakeholder need or every opinion. But if we ask why and how, right, at least we can get to something that's palatable. And by the way, we're doing it. Like I could probably name 100 times where I've been on projects where we actually, I think unintentionally just stop talking about it or don't keep a pulse on things because it feels so complex. You're like, I don't know how we're going to pinpoint success. So we'll just almost like, we'll see how it goes.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
I think you bring up a good point, and that actually gets us to question number 2, which is, how have you evolved your change measures over time? What did you do, and where do you go? Yeah,
I think, well, just going kind of what Dwight was saying of like, where do you focus or how do you lean in to make it simple? One thing for change management, I've been trying to over the years come up with like, all right, what is it? What is a good change strategy? What, if you do A, B, and C, you will get success. And for anyone that's is either a change practitioner, ever Google change management, like there's a million charts, there's a million models, right? There's a lot out there. And for me, what I've evolved over time is it's kind of come down to 3 things for me. So one is information, right? Like how are you informing and equipping people on what a change is or how it impacts them specifically, right? Like the what's in it for me. But how do you share that information so that it's meaningful, it connects? 2, support, right? What support do people need in going through change? And support could be anything from, hey, I need to do training. In other words, there's like skill building. Or it could be support like, I just need to check in with this person because it's a little bit of an emotional journey for them and I need to show that I'm invested in them still. Or support could be, hey, this person's making a career change. I really need to get them a mentor. I need to like think about what sort of resources they might need. So support. And then the last one, like encouragement. You always use the phrase like walk the talk. Like that's part of that. It's also the recognition, like what behavior are we looking for in this new environment or in this new way of working? How do we reward and recognize. And that could be in a traditional sense of like, hey, nice job, high five, to, rewards, to even reward systems, right? Like, what are the routines in an organization that either support or take away from a behavioral expectation that we might want to shift so that we're encouraging people? So information, support, and encouragement are like those are the three things that I've come down to and change, that if you're doing these three things as a leader, you're going to have better success in facilitating your transformation than you would have of not thinking about it at all. And so how that plays into then how do you measure that? It's looking at, okay, how do we know that people received their information, right? How do we start breaking that down and making measures? So it could be things like, are we dropping an Easter egg, like in the email communication, where people get to be like, yeah, I read that. Or maybe they get like a little reward.
I'm sorry. Hold on a second, Carl. I have to interrupt you. Are you saying people don't read emails?
I don't know if this is your experience, but in my experience,
wait, because you're talking about dropping Easter
forget.
eggs in, like you're trying to encourage people to read. They always read your emails, don't they?
I know, it's crazy. It's a crazy thought. If it's the craziest one that I've left today, then at least we've started out.
Yeah,
we will not
and that's
discuss
one of the points,
my inbox.
right? I have 100,000 emails that are unread on my personal side. On the business side, it's only down to 5 or 6, of course. But that becomes one of the problems, though, right? When you're trying to make sure change management happens, and one of the keys is you're communicating through email. How do you make sure that they read it, and how do you make sure they're still a participant in your process when emails are the most ignored form of communication these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I mean, I think so. Even just the Easter egg idea is just based on that, which is like people don't really read. Maybe there's some really important things, and then that starts more word of mouth, right? It's probably not going to be a expectation that everyone's like, oh, I need to go get a little reward in my email, but it'd be like, oh, Dan over there just read the email and told me to go check it out too because he found this, right? But so that's one, just move that aside. That's where I was going with the email, which is how do you maybe inspire or ignite? But I think what you're touching on is something much more important, which is it's not just about the email communications. What are you doing to reach the hearts and minds and souls of the people that work for your organization? And so part of that is then taking a look at those informal channels and how do people work, right? Our tech team might use more Confluence and social channels, whereas HR might be more hey, we're still hitting the once a month HR meeting. So how do you tap into those things to also communicate the message? And then in the spirit of measurement, my next question, just as it would have been with an email or anything that we're saying, which is how do we know that the message was received or understood or put value upon? And if you're tapped into a routine, let's go with the meeting, maybe I can just do a quick survey after the meeting, or even in the meeting, I can just do a quick show of hands.
Yeah. Well, and on the web and in lots of communities, we use polling as a way of being able to capture not quizzes, but polling. Did the message get through to you? A, B, C. What are the 3 things that you took away from A, B, C, D, E? Choose the ones that resonated with you, or that you think you learned from it. And then people might have to go back and re-engage with the change management to be able to make sure that they actually did. But I don't know why we don't check ourselves. And as kids, we were quizzed and tested all the time. And I guess my question is, why wouldn't we? I mean, we're all mature here. We all know that a lot of these things are critical, and the measurement of did that change management work is critical. So why wouldn't we, force people to kind of tell us, did they really learn what we hope they learned?
One thought that I have on it is, and this has really become my pet peeve, is the topic of survey fatigue. Yeah. And every time I go and do anything, I get a survey. If I call a customer service line, I get within a minute, I get a survey from them, no matter how short my question. Did we resolve your problem? And will you take this 2-minute survey for us? And so I think you have to be selective about how you do that polling. And sometimes I think you also have to be creative about it. You need to keep your eyes and ears open to buzz things that you may not specifically be polling people, but you can start to get a sense just from the way they're talking and the things that they're saying that, hey, the message is sinking in, and yes, I understood it, or you're just not hearing anything. You're getting crickets with it. So
Yeah.
I think your point's a good point, David. Your point's a good point, but it does get difficult, and it gets difficult to get good measurement on it. And I think you have to get creative sometimes with it.
For sure. You were making me think of, after you said the emails that you get from customer service calls. My favorite is when you get on the phone and you've waited 5 minutes just to even get to a person, and then they say, "Would you be willing to stay an extra minute or two to answer our questions?" My answer is always absolutely.
Hell no.
Yeah.
But Carlee, I think the things that both you and Dwight are talking about, though, require us to provide that feedback, because I sat on calls for a half an hour 5 times in a row to try and resolve an issue I had with my mobile provider and their insurance company for a specific issue I was having. And I kept trying to get to resolution. They said that they resolved my problem, and then I'd get an email the next day saying I didn't. And so I did provide that feedback, and I was very, let's just say animated, but not too much so they wouldn't listen to me. And so that's where I come back to if I need to measure the effectiveness of change management, and we're all mature adults and we're in a business situation, I need to be able to ask my people internally, how do you reflect on that? What's your response from it? How did this touch you? And did we do the right things? Do you understand the messages? Because if not, then we may have actually wasted that money. We may have wasted that time. And that's why I think we need to hold people inside our organizations to a higher level of, it doesn't matter that you had that problem, from Hyatt Hotels sending you the customer survey. But when we're asking you about change management surveys from corporate, we should get an answer back. High end too, very high end.
It's a good point.
Yeah. I think that's important. And with that, when you talk about survey fatigue, I think if at the organizational level, we're being intentional about when we are asking, what we're asking, and how often, I think that becomes, to your point, kind of that business expectation, and it hopefully doesn't feel like overburden. I think the other thing you're talking about, which is interesting, and it's all still sticks in the measurement, because when we talk about like informal and simple, I think it could be like, let's just use this meeting that we're talking about, right? What if instead of sending a survey after the meeting, or even a poll in the meeting, what if I think one of the challenges, like, how do we make it fun or unique? All these tools have fun things tied to them. Like, I think about Zoom today. My favorite thing is to open up the little emoji options and just get a vote that way. I'd be like, all right, put in the lizard if you agree. Put in the diamond if you disagree, right? So it's even, you can do, a quick check on that in fun ways that also, again, it gives you insight, right? People are on board or not on board. Or multitasking, and I call them out. I'm like, where's your diamond? And I think where we started with this too, around, in quote, expectation, I think it also sits in, I'll go back to my bucket of support, but more importantly, like leadership. How
absolutely
the role of leadership plays in caring for others. I think checking in is an appropriate expectation. Don't you want to be checking in with your people? Because if they're, in this case, going through a change, they're going to need things. They're going to need support. They're going to need information. They're going to need encouragement. And if you're not checking along the way, you're just guessing. And you may or may not be hitting the mark if you're even doing anything at all to help your colleagues. So I think I agree with you on that sort of business expectation, which is, how are we caring for one another?
So you're saying, though, that the leader should be the one that does the measurement, or that is, sponsoring the measurement? Obviously, they're not hitting the button on send, right? But if it's coming from that leader, and she or he has that really interesting way of communicating, and hopefully that comes across in the language used as well, so it doesn't sound like it wasn't them, but it comes from them, it's their name on it, and they're asking, hey, how did this affect you? I would just want to know. Let's say maybe one question survey, like an NPS. Are you saying that that's a more effective way of having it happen?
I think what I was suggesting was more just kind of the approach of us, your sentiment of like, do we require people in business to do these things? And I was like, I think if you care about people, you should be checking in. And to your question, though, it's making me think, which is, I think you could do both. I think you can give a construct to leaders to manage change locally right? And
Right.
they're also equipped to say like, hey, my team's really struggling with this. In other words, that's a data point that rolls up. I think you could also shape it out, and I've seen this done before, which is you give that leader a construct, like, hey, make sure you're checking in with your team. And then you as a leader, I'm going to send you a survey, I'm going to make it up, once a month to see how you and your team are doing, right? So they're kind of informally checking, then we're doing a formal measure to have that data coming in so that we also have organizational insights. So I think the answer is yes to your question, right? It could be all of the above, because
Right.
measure and insight can come from a lot of different ways, and it can serve different purpose. What we're talking about is, does it serve the center or does it serve the local execution?
So, Carlee, that brings up the next question, which is, what is your favorite way, though, of measuring change?
My favorite way, I would say, so there's two things that I love doing. One is like before and after, right? Before change, during change, after change. I think the other is also, and then surfacing that in comparative ways. So for example, today we were actually going through a big change acquisition where we're bringing teams together. And so we've started doing working norms, looking at working norms, literally styles, like how quickly do you respond to an email?
Right.
When you make a decision, is it final or not final? How does influence happen, right? And these working norms often could be a rub in a relationship, right? If you have a different perspective on way of working than I do, right, we're going to probably lose some trust in that situation, probably be some frustrating points. So we're using surveys, but we're looking at, right, two legacy organizations coming together. If you have a data set from one company and a data set from another company, how are those working norms coming together, right? If company A does it one way and company B does another, just having that data gives us insight. That's why I've been struggling with so-and-so. Like, they're just working in a different style. Awareness is important. And then the next part of that is like, what do we want to do with that? So in the working norm space, it's, hey, we maybe want to like tweak a routine that we have. Like when we think about meeting routines, maybe now we have an agenda and we have a decision maker identified at the start. So I love that. That was kind of just into an example, but my answer is like, I love that before look and after look, because one, it gives you a benchmark and you can see if you've made progress, if you've been struggling. It tells a good story too, right? This is where we were before. Here's how we're progressing. And then I also love that comparative space. I used it in the case of like team on team, but I think you can compare functions. I think you can compare periods of time. I think you can compare, hey, we employed this change strategy at this juncture in the timeline. How do we compare that to when we implemented a different strategy? Was that more effective? So that's something I've come to really love, is that comparative in time.
It's fascinating, though, that you brought it up in the context of an M&A, right? That's an obvious application of it. But there are less obvious applications that I think, our listeners could take and utilize in their daily work, which is literally almost every freaking change, because there's going to be a before and after. There's going to be a different way of working, whether it's implementation of a new technology, whether it's from the compensation world, introducing pay transparency, and how does that affect you? And knowing how the company wants us to react and being able to break down some of those traditional patterns in the before and after, it would be fascinating to do that analysis, wouldn't it?
Oh, for sure. Before, after, along the way, like think of those like multi-year transformations where even if you're just asking about sentiment, right? Like how are people feeling about the change? And that's an ongoing question that you're asking. You're able to see those peaks and valleys where people might be stuck or feeling really good. And those are insights that, well, we don't have today if we don't ask. And then the next question is, well, what do we want to do with it? So yeah, totally. I think you gave a lot of good examples, and I would add in also local things, right? We talked about job changes or shifts in responsibilities, becoming a leader, right? There's a lot of stuff that you can look at. I was going to say
new CEM, new CHR. Any new leadership causes dramatic or dramatic ways of looking at the world. Politics, for example, I don't mean politics in the outside world. I mean internal corporate politics. They really do matter. Yep. And when you're managing or you're trying to measure the change of that transformation, it at least informs, what do we need to do? Is there any different messaging we probably need to put out there in order to be able to deal with it?
Absolutely. Again, insight that you didn't have before. And with insight, you can take action.
Sometimes I feel like when we make big changes and we don't support our managers and employees in being able to provide them with the right data or the right understanding. I'll give you an example of when we're doing a merit increase, and especially merit increase during really hard economic times. Wouldn't it be great to be able to give out, to do some change management, or to, be able to train people on how is the world around us affecting our process this year? What's going to be in your check after the merit increase process, and why and how do we come up with the decision to do what we did instead of just deal with it? It's the business reality of where we are, which I think a lot of organizations had to do.
Yeah. The shove it down your throat approach.
Yep.
And then measure it and see, should we have done something differently?
Yep.
Right. Did we miss the mark on this?
All of those questions, I think, can be flipped. Yeah, if we're asking people, again, insights, and then we can take action.
Unfortunately, we get a lot of feedback by people walking out the door.
There's also that, right? The unwritten feedback.
Well, and you just hit on an important point, Carlee, when you said we take action. You've got to be willing to take action with it, because it's one thing to get the data points and to understand what's going on. It's another thing to actually take action, especially if that action means reversing course on the change that you're trying to make. You know, there are times where it's appropriate to say, okay, time out. We need to pause, or wow, we really missed it on that one, and we need to go backwards on this.
100%. Yeah. What are we willing to evolve, improve, sacrifice in that receiving feedback? Yeah.
So Carlee, I think we've talked a lot about change management and the use of data and being able to manage the change. We've talked about how you might be able to evolve some measures over time as you're doing it. And also we looked at some of your favorite ways of actually measuring change. Anything else that you wanted to add before we close?
I think I would just go back to the simplicity. I think just in our dialogue, the three of us have been able to kind of get down to like why it's important. What are the sort of things that you can ask and make it also in a fun way so that you're getting that information. And I think the other thing I've even just been realizing as we've been talking about is there's, data and there's also insight. And I think what we spent a lot of time talking about is like, how do we get insights that are going to matter? And I think those insights can also be reported in meaningful ways, right? Drive business decisions, help facilitate better and more effective change, have colleagues and employees feel like they're heard and cared about. Like, I think those could all be outcomes. So I would just encourage folks to continue to find those insights. And when you're stuck, just what's the most simple thing that we can go after today to at least get some of those insights that will then facilitate more. Because also what I found is insights inspire more, right? You get more investment from folks to want to dig in or to capture more. So I would just leave with that, because I think insight is powerful, and it also grows in maturity for what people can consume or buy into when you talk about data and impact. So, and I also just really appreciate being here.
It's our pleasure. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being with us.
And thank you for listening. Take care and stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.